Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and today I am ranking the horror and thriller films of 2017. The horror genre is an expansive one that is also one of my favorites. Encompassing several subgenres, this is a particularly difficult one to narrow down and focus to make a list out of. So I've gone back and forth on several different films. Is this more of an action? Is this more of a drama? Is this more of just a thriller and not really any elements of horror in here? And in the end, I dwindled it down to 22 films for this ranking. 22 films that I feel incorporate horror into the movie at some point, whether it's a psychological horror, a straight up traditional horror film, or something a little bit more thriller-esque. They all incorporate something to do within the horror genre. I also have not seen several of the smaller indie foreign horror films. I'm sorry, Cinephile with the microphone, one of my friends. He gave me a couple recommendations, and unfortunately I wasn't able to see all of these smaller films. But here's my ranking of the 22 horror and thriller films that I saw in 2017. Coming in at number 22, aka dead last, is The Bye-Bye Man. This movie was horrible. I found almost nothing redeemable about it. It had a Candyman-style premise, but lacked any scares. The effects looked horrible, in particular that hellhound that comes at the end. And it just looked like a college project level production. It looked horrible. It was horribly written. It just was an amateur level film that was made by a non-amateur level company and released wide into theaters. Honestly, one of the worst movies of 2017, period, and the worst in the horror genre. At number 21, I have Rings, which is pretty close to being just as bad as The Bye-Bye Man. The only thing that saved this one was a slightly higher production value. It seemed like an actual professional film when looking at it. But what a mess. Did we really need another Rings film? And did we really need another Rings film that was just this stupid? Completely void of scares. Pretty much a parody upon itself at this point. It just was horrible. The script was horrible. The effects, again, were not very good. The whole storyline and the whole plot that we got was a mess. Yeah. Also, one of the worst of the year. At number 20, we have Wish Upon. I have to say, this also did not really look like a professional film. It looked a complete and total amateur mess, and also ripped off so many films from Wishmaster to Final Destination. It just compiled all of these other concepts and smashed them into one movie, and not a very good movie at that. Our characters are horribly unlikable and stupid, including our main character. Ryan Felipe gives an okay performance, and there are some decent performances in here, people that are at least trying, and I did like that they didn't cop out at the end. But those are basically the only redeemable factors, and the only reason it was able to beat out the two below it on this list. At number 19, I have Friend Request. So I definitely think this one amps up the creepy factor over the bottom three on this. There are actual atmospheric moments. There are actual tension-filled pieces here. However, again, it looked a hot mess. It doesn't look very professionally made. The premise is something we just saw from a far superior film with Unfriended. And again, the script is all over the place. We don't really get development. We don't get proper building of what actually is taking place. It's also void of actual scares. It has some creepy imagery that, again, gets it up above these other three, but it's still not a good movie. At number 18, I have Flatliners. I actually don't hate this film, like so many others seem to, but it doesn't make it a very good film either. This film falls in the so what category. We didn't need it. We didn't need a remake of Flatliners. We didn't really ask for it. No one was clamoring for it. And what they delivered here was just there. It didn't have a pulse. It felt flatlined itself. And I think the performances were okay from some much stronger actors. The things that they were dealing with and the pasts that came back to haunt them, I was like, yeah, you all are horrible people and deserve to get haunted. But the characters weren't really likable. They weren't really relatable. And as I said, it just like trucks along with no scares to be seen, without a pulse. At number 17, I have Kidnap. Another hot mess script that is just all over the place. However, Kidnap elevates itself above this like real bottom tier of horror and thriller films because it's at least doing something the entire time. As soon as you press gas, this movie is unrelenting all the way through until the end. And I decided to include this one, although it's much more on the thriller aspect, is because it deals with the kidnapping. It tries to create elements of, is the kid gonna die? Is she gonna die? What's gonna happen? And I think that kind of pushed it more into the horror-y, thriller type of things. But I thought it was a performance from Halle Berry. I thought all of our side characters gave horrible performances. I was yelling at the screen over stupid decisions that were being made left, right, and center. It's not a good movie, but it's also not a boring one. So maybe Flatliners could have taken some of that energy and injected it into that dead pulse. At number 16, I have Mother. So Mother is elevated above all of these other films because at least it's trying something. At least it's striving for something, and it's going for something different, going for something kind of fresh. And I can appreciate that aspect. And there are good things to be had here. I think Jennifer Lawrence gives a great performance in our lead role. I thought Michelle Pfeiffer and that whole storyline was fantastic. And probably about the first half of the movie, I was on board. And then Jennifer Lawrence gets pregnant and it all falls apart. There is allegory after allegory, metaphor after metaphor, all shoved in to this thin plot. It's like conflicting metaphors that don't fit together. And it becomes somewhat of a pompous, pretentious, self-congratulatory mess from director Darren Aronofsky. I wanted to love Mother. It was just such a huge disappointment. And honestly, a mess of a film. And I know it has defenders and it has hardcore people out there who love it, but it just doesn't work. It thinks it's a whole lot smarter than it actually proves to be. At number 15, I have 47 Meters Down. I thought this movie was pretty fun, actually. I did not hate this movie either. Yes, the production value is also a little bit questionable, and that script is a shoddy mess. But the whole sequence at the end of the film with the like ultra red in the water, the sharks coming at Mandy Moore from every which angle, I thought that was such a fun, awesome sequence that it kind of made up for anything the beginning of the film seemed to lack, because we were dealing with a whole lot of subplot that we didn't care about. All of these relationships that weren't earned, weren't developed, and a really bad decision making, as per usual in thrillers and horrors. But when we're down on that bottom, I thought it's a fun concept, a good start to a good shark film. I wish there were more sharks, but what we got was fun for what it was trying to do. At number 14, I have Jigsaw. So the Saw franchise just couldn't help itself. It could not stay dead. But I think it came back at least improved on the last several entries within the franchise. I had a pretty good time with Jigsaw. As per usual, the writing, the overall filmmaking is not great here. It doesn't look like a great film. The script is not great, and the characters aren't likable. But that's pretty much a staple with the Saw franchise at this point, isn't it? I thought that the scares were fun. I thought that the whole multiple timeline aspect worked really well. It kept you on your toes. It had an unexpected ending. And I thought the detective aspect of this one worked better than the aspect of the films that were leading up to it. A big improvement on the last several Saw films, and a solid little horror film itself. At number 13, I have Alien Covenant. So I've ragged pretty hard on how disappointing and bleh this movie is all year long, but it gets all the way up to number 13, purely based on the strength of the first act alone. When this film is being a horror alien film, it is so good. When they are on that ship, when the aliens invade, when they're running for their lives, landing on this planet, it is a really, really good film. And I was so on board with what we were given. And I do think there are aspects of horror sprinkled in that last 2 acts of the film that work well as well. There are some conversations that work okay. But this really turned into Prometheus 2 with those last 2 acts, talking about creationism, talking about all of these things that we don't really care about and we don't really want to know about. We get the backstory to how xenomorphs were made. Did we need that? Did we learn nothing from midichlorians? Let them be an alien species. We don't need to know how they came to be. So many of the twists were like completely obvious and were forecasted miles away. And although I do think Michael Fassbender gives another really good performance here, it's just weighed down by so much foolishness that didn't need to be there. I really wish we would have gotten a much more straightforward horror film, and then this probably may have even broken my top 5. But as is, it's a huge disappointment that just didn't work for me. At number 12, I have The Belko Experiment. A lot of people have been ragging on this film this year, but I actually liked The Belko Experiment quite a bit. This is one of the most gory, gruesome horror films we got in 2017, and it fully embraced it. This is like a balls to the wall, swinging for the fence type of horror film. The concept is really interesting and a really cool thing to think about when you first start off. And honestly, this film was aided by real-world news this year. Because my big problem was, who in their right mind would ever let their workplace put a chip into them? Lo and behold, here comes the real world to be like, there are people volunteering at this company to let you put chips in them for the convenience of not having to swipe a card, but just walk into rooms. What? But the ending turned out to be a big kind of like, okay. And the acting, not so great. The script itself, But I thought the kills were fun. I thought the concept was cool. And it just was so gruesome that as a horror fan, I had a pretty good time with the Belko Experiment. At number 11, I have The Killing of a Sacred Deer. So here we are, right around the midpoint. This is the final film of the bottom half of the countdown. This worked okay as a psychological horror to me. I actually found the second act of this movie to be spectacular. I thought it was really strong. We were getting the story, we were getting the tension, we were getting those horror thriller aspects, and it worked so well. But the first act just took so long to get to anything. Just sitting there with nothing happening. And then the last act is really good up until the very end, and it didn't quite work for me. My biggest problems with The Killing of a Sacred Deer are the weird dialogue choices, the weird directing choices that were made here. The very disconnected, distant, cold, almost inhuman delivery of the lines and the script itself did not work for me. And I understand it was an artistic choice, and I understand that it was an artistic choice, just one that I don't think worked at all, because that's part of the thing with horror films. We should at least somewhat care about these people, and we don't. So when you couple not caring because you're sitting there with distant dialogue meant to push you away, and nothing happening for a good third of the film at least, it's hard to stay invested in the film right from the get-go. But there's enough redeemable stuff within The Killing of a Sacred Deer. There is enough that I actually did like, that it does get all the way up to number 11. At number 10, I have A Cure for Wellness. I absolutely loved this movie for the first 2/3 of it. Not enough credit is given to this film just purely based on how beautifully it is shot and the cinematography itself. This is one of the most gorgeous films I have seen in 2017. Stunning. And the mystery aspect was really involved. It had me invested in what was going on, what was happening, where we were going with all of this. I thought the acting was strong from pretty much everyone. And for 2/3, it created such a cool, atmospheric horror that I was on board with and loving. And then it kind of drove off a cliff, because that last third is a hot mess. Talk about jumping the shark, it just went completely off the rails and turned into this weird mess. Just mess. But A Cure for Wellness gets all the way up to number 10, with the whole act of the film being a hot mess, because those first 2 acts I thought were so strong that, hey, I can halfway forgive that messy ending. And it just does so much, so well. It was an ambitious horror film. It was pushing, it was striving. And unlike something like The Killing of a Sacred Deer or Mother, I think it was much more successful in actually getting to where it was striving to be. Unfortunately, like those other two, it just wasn't able to quite reach its goal. At number 9, I have Happy Death Day. The big horror comedy, the kind of slapsticky horror comedy of the year. One that I was anticipating seeing, but also very, very scared to watch. So color me very shocked when I walked out of this having a really fun time. I will say it is very, very light on horror. There's not a lot of kills here, there are not very many scares here, jump scare here, jump scare there. But this pretty much is a comedy, a Groundhog's Day film with slasher elements added in. But I found that it succeeded at what it set out to be. It executed Groundhog's Day comedy with slasher elements very well. I was fully on board with the investigation of trying to figure out who it was who was killing her. I thought it was a fun mystery to kind of wade through. I really enjoyed most all of our side characters, and Jessica Rothe did a great job in the title role. Though, her character still presents one of the biggest problems with the film, in my opinion. Because she started off so unlikable, and such a treacherous, horrible person, that we didn't see the development as she moved along through the movie, so getting to that end point felt completely unearned and still kind of like, I don't really care about you, because you've been so horrible this whole time. But Happy Death Day was a pleasant surprise and a ton of fun. That's why it's all the way up at number 9. At number 8, I have Life. So I'm aware that a lot of people actually didn't really like Life all that much, but I thought it was actually really solid. And I think it was aided by the fact that Alien Covenant came out, just a month or two later. Because honestly, this executed an Alien film better than the actual Alien film to be released in 2017. But this was a straightforward alien supernatural horror film, and I thought it executed that so well. First of all, I loved the design of the alien. I thought it was realistic, much more realistic than most aliens we see in space. And it did leave us with a lot of suspenseful and thrilling sequences throughout the film. Plus, obviously, this whole cast came to play. You had Jake Gyllenhaal, Rebecca Ferguson, Ryan Reynolds. Everybody did what they needed to do to lift this film to where it ended up. And I thought the emotional stuff all worked really well, thanks in great part to our actors. And I loved that ending. It doesn't get much higher because, hey, it's not very original. We have seen this before, and we've seen it executed similarly well or even better in the past. I thought it accomplished what it set out to do, and I had a good time with it. At number 7, I have Personal Shopper, another psychological horror film to make the list. And the first one that is a success. The first one that we've talked about so far that accomplished its goal and actually created a psychological horror film that worked. The reason it's down at number 7 is basically because it doesn't have a whole lot of horror elements, and it was one of those films that really teetered the line for me on, should this even be included here, or is it much more of a drama? But there's enough. There's blood, there's murder, there's killing. It's enough to be on the horror film, just not enough to get all the way up on this list. But it's bolstered by a fantastic career best performance from Kristen Stewart that is sadly being overlooked because it really was a great performance. And again, we have this mystery involving ghosts and supernatural entities contacting this character and kind of like guiding us along through the story that has you interested and has you playing along with the who is it and where are we going with this storyline throughout. And I will say that open ending was okay. It wasn't as horrible as some of the other open ending indie, smart endings that have come. But I also didn't love the ending either, which knocked it down just a bit for me. And I think as we're moving along through the first act or so, it definitely loses steam. But this is a solid, really good, well-written, well-acted film. At number 6, I have Annabel Creation. The first Annabelle was a huge disappointment, not a very good film, so I wasn't really looking forward to them making another Annabelle film specifically, but this one was awesome. I loved this movie. For a straight-up horror film, it was great. I thought it brought the scares. I thought it brought the tension. That game where they were on the bunk bed was an awesome scene. The whole mind games aspect of what was happening here just worked so well with the lights, with the scarecrows, all of it just worked great. Plus, I thought they used Annabelle this time to great effect, which is something they just decided not to do at all pretty much in the first one. But I thought Annabelle herself was used great in this movie. The child actors here were fantastic. I thought almost all of it was great. And a smart thing that they do with these films is when you put kids in our lead roles, it's a little bit more acceptable for them to make stupid decisions because, hey, they're kids. But there were aspects where you're like, okay, this is a little bit too much, or this is a little bit too dumb to forgive. And it didn't reinvent any wheels, so it didn't quite make it into the top 5. But for what it was delivering for a mainstream horror film, a crowd pleaser, I thought it was very good. So we're at the top 5, and kicking us off at number 5 is Raw. I thought this was a fantastic movie. Now I'm going to be honest, I don't really get scared ever with horror films. I just love the genre, I think it's fun, but things don't really scare me. I will say torture porn will make me look away because it's a little bit too much. And when I heard that people were leaving this theater like puking after watching Raw, I wimped out. I didn't want to watch it in the movie theater, so I finally rented it. I said I cannot make this list without seeing Raw first. And I'm so glad I did. What a great movie. What an intelligent and smart script. The whole correlation between coming of age and to becoming a cannibal was insane, but so well done and so well executed. I was completely invested and interested in this girl's insane transformation and story, right along with her sister, who also was coming into her own self as well, and learning to open up and just kind of be who she was. And it does give you the cannibalism. It does give you the straight up horror element several times throughout the film that make you just oh no, that's nasty. And I thought it just worked well. It's beautifully shot, beautifully acted, with an amazing script. And I have to say, I really thought the ending on this one worked. There's kind of a twist ending, an ending that kind of explains some of the questions you have throughout, because I was theorizing throughout, and it gets wrapped up nicely in a pretty awesome way at the end. So I loved Raw, and it made it up to number 5. At number 4, I have It Comes at Night. So this was the most successful kind of psychological horror film of the year to me. So many people were so disappointed with this film, and I agree. The marketing completely misled us all. It brought us into the theater thinking we were getting a much more straightforward, straight-up horror film, but what we got was still so good that I don't know how people are so angry. This film did such a fantastic job of building and then maintaining tension. I felt tense the entire time watching this film. It's almost relentless in the atmosphere that it creates. And again, it does keep you guessing. You're kind of going back and forth on what does come, what keeps happening here, what is this mysterious disease that we keep hearing of. Yes, we've seen some aftermath of it, but what's going on? And then for this film to turn out to be a study of paranoia and of human behavior and reaction was fantastic. Oh, as we watched it unfold, I was horrified watching what these people were doing. At the end of the film, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was such an intelligent, smart film, a fantastic script that unfolded to perfection in that final act that I loved It Comes at Night. Yes, it might move a little bit slow, and yes, that marketing definitely threw in a misdirect, but the final product was more than satisfactory in my book. I did love It Comes at Night. At number 3, I have Split. What an awesome film. I think this was just a great, great movie, completely lifted onto the shoulders of James McAvoy and his superb performance. I think he was fantastic in this movie, as was Anya Taylor-Joy, who is becoming the new modern-day Scream Queen. But it's a straight-up abduction thriller with kind of a multiple personality aspect to it, to add in that horror element. And my problems with this film that bumped it out of the top two are that I think it mischaracterizes multiple personality disorders and does demonize multiple personality disorders to an extent. But I also think it's very respectful to that disorder, and especially through the psychologist, psychiatrist, professor that we are following, she does a really great job of discussing it. Of course, that then is met down the line with not so great results, but I do think they do a decent job, at least to start, at trying to humanize it all. And then the ending, I thought got a little bit crazy. I'm on board with changing your body composition and your mind being able to go in and out of all of these different states as you completely change personalities within that mind. But then when we actually physically were changing the genetic makeup of how you look and being able to grow and shrink, I was like, oh, we're getting crazy. But then there's that twist that makes that okay again, that explains it into, okay, we're back on board. But this film was great. I loved watching Anya Taylor-Joy and the decisions she was making as she tried to escape. And I think the escapism, tension aspects of it worked so well. And we were all interested. We were all fully invested in this character that James McAvoy was bringing to the screen. So I loved it. I've seen it a few times now, and it's all the way up at number 3 for me. At number 2, I have It. I love this film. I think it is such a well-executed, awesome movie. First of all, the acting from all of these child stars was really fantastic, as was the acting from Bill Skarsgård. He had a lot to live up to, because that miniseries does a lot of things really hokey and wrong, but good old Tim Curry here created an iconic character. And I won't say that I think Bill Skarsgård is better at all than Tim Curry. It's just very different. He took the character in a much different way, and it was so successful, and at least on par with what Tim Curry was able to create, which is a feat. But I loved balance here. This film is about a dancing clown terrorizing you. And yes, I know it's not technically a clown, but that's the form he manifests himself into. So we get aspects of the more Tim Curry, jokey Pennywise in here. But this film also brings out the scares and the jump scares and the creep factor so much more effectively than that original miniseries did. This film is just such a wonderful mix of coming of age, heart, mixed with horror. Production value, off the charts. It looks fantastic until you get to the ending with those special effects, and then you're like, oof, okay. As we all saw with the dancing Pennywise memes, it got a little bit ridiculous. But I'm excited. I hope that they can improve upon the second act, because that's where the miniseries just completely falls apart for me. And I thought they did such a great job with part 1 that it's all the way up at number 2 on my horror rankings for the year. So that leaves us with the top dog, number 1, the best horror film of 2017. And for me, that's Get Out. I love this film. I think this is one of the best scripts from any film in any genre for 2017. There's so much nuance, so much intelligence, so many metaphors. It's just like ripe and rich with so many layers within this script. Something that no other horror or thriller could even come close to this year. And I don't think many other films outside of the genre could either. The direction was fantastic, especially for a first-time director. The acting was stellar. Daniel Kaluuya was amazing in this movie. And it's so rich with social commentary without ever feeling preachy, without ever feeling self-righteous. Being very direct in, we are going there, while still making it so entertaining. The side comedy is fantastic. It is so well used in this movie. The thriller aspects of what is happening is fantastic. And again, those parallels to the horrors of the movie being parallel to the horrors of people in the United States was fantastic. Plus, this is a horror film that I saw in a screening. I saw it at a pre-screening, in which the audience started groaning and cheering and audibly reacting. You would have thought I was sitting in a Star Wars or superhero film. The audience was so invested. and so involved in what was happening to these characters. It was one of the most fun, amazing theater experiences I've had in 2017, and honestly, I think it's far and away the best horror or thriller film to come out of the year. So that is my ranking of the horror and thriller films of 2017. What did you think of how I ranked these films? What would your personal ranking be? And what films did I not get around to seeing do I need to check out? Let me know either in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. And if you like this video, please make sure to click that thumbs up down below and subscribe to the channel so you are always up to date on our latest videos. I love you all so much for your support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!